What's happening, people? Welcome back to another show. This is the Upper Tier Podcast. It's a kind of a bonus Pro Wrestling Weekly show. Don't forget to join us tonight, 9 o'clock. Myself and Darren will be bringing you this week's Pro Wrestling Weekly show. A day later to fit in with Darren's schedule, but we're going to have a fantastic show. We're going to put together some really good stuff. We're going to be talking AEW. We're going to be talking Mercedes Moné, Will Ospreay. We're going to be talking lots and lots of stuff. WrestleMania update on the card. We're definitely going to be talking about that ladder match and some of the qualifying matches, all that kind of stuff. We're going to be talking about The Rock's concert and the heat as well that might be on him in terms of the memo that was issued to the roster, the PG memo that doesn't apply to The Rock. We'll get your thoughts on all that stuff. We'll also have our usual roundup of pro wrestling history and notable birthdays and all that good stuff. So the conversation's going to be lit tonight, 9 o'clock. Pro Wrestling Weekly, don't miss it. But let's get into the show now. This is it. Dark Side of the Ring, Season 5, Episode 3, Terry Gordy, the final flight of the Freebirds. Again, another tough one to go through. I'm of the age where I'm old enough to remember the Freebirds and the Von Erichs and all that kind of stuff. I lived through that kind of period. That was my starting point nearly in pro wrestling in terms of being a fan and stuff like that. I remember how huge the Freebirds were and all that kind of stuff around the Horseman time and the Von Erichs and the whole Jim Crockett promotion and the territories in the NWA and all that kind of stuff. But this one is another one that's more like a sad side of the ring than a dark side of the ring. Obviously, we know during this time period, you know, the taking of pills and the painkillers and the drink and all that kind of stuff was prevalent in the business. Very few wrestlers went through the business that didn't get caught up in this in some shape, form or fashion. But Terry Gordy, what a performer he was and stuff like that. And what an enforcer and a wrestler he was, you know. And it starts off with Miranda, his daughter and all, and the family, and it talks about him in wrestling, and she's involved in wrestling as well, which often happens. Plenty of second generation, third generation wrestlers come through. Sounds from her that she's very proud of her father as well and what he achieved and all the things. But if you go back to Terry himself, started at 14 years of age, such a tender age, didn't get the chance to go through school and do the education, the normal stuff that 14-year-olds onwards would do. Literally went into the ring straight away, was a big guy, always was a big guy. Even the pictures that they show from when he was 14, he was quite a big lad as well. So got into the wrestling. Now 14 is kind of a tender age as well, because at that age you're kind of starting maturing into a man, all that kind of stuff. Your body is developing, your skeletal structure, your bone structure and all. So is it really a good idea to be starting pro wrestling at that stage and taking those bumps and going through all that training that you have to go through? We've seen it here even in Ireland with lads. They have a certain age limit from when guys start and all that. They do run junior classes, but they're always very careful with those guys because obviously their bodies are only developing and stuff like that. But he was a big kid, you know, went through his wrestling and all that, got noticed, and then teamed up with Michael Hayes, and of course they formed the Freebirds with Buddy Roberts. And when you look at that group and all that kind of stuff, you got Michael Hayes, the showman, Buddy Roberts as well, also a showman, but very good wrestler as well. But you Terry Gordy in there, who was the enforcer. He was the Arn Anderson of the fabulous Freebirds. And I remember that feud with the Von Erichs. Anyone who's just watched the Iron Claw, it was unbelievable. We heard Jim Cornette talking about it. Probably one of the greatest feuds in terms of tag teams or six-mans that ever happened in wrestling. Ran over 2 years, went through every single town in Texas, drew huge money wherever they went. Feuded for 2.5 years. Probably one of the highlights of the Von Erichs as well. It was unbelievable. But this time, when you look at the footage of that stuff, it was as real as it got. These guys beat the living Jesus out of each other every single night they went at it, over probably a 2.5 year period. So that takes the toll on your body, of course, and stuff, you know. Unbelievable. But like when you look at it then, obviously Terry got the opportunity to go to Japan, went over to Japan, got injured over there, blew out both his knees, that kind of stuff. And when you're over there touring, I'd imagine in Japan can be quite a lonely place at times, especially culturally as well. You're trying to adapt to that as well. So it's not always for everyone heading over to Japan. But obviously over there, a lot of time on his hands, injured, trying to work through injury, all that kind of stuff. And of course you find solace in the bottom of a bottle or the bottom of a pill bottle or whatever it is, and then it escalates from there and becomes more and more and more. And we know how these drug things, we've done a million episodes on these kind of things where the drugs and the drink takes hold of you, and then it escalates, gets more and more and more. And in order to relieve what you're going through, either mentally or pain within your body, and because especially over in Japan, if you're not able to work, you're not much good to anyone, so you have to sometimes work through injury and work through pain, all that kind of stuff. And it escalated to the point where it got really bad, and he nearly died. He came back. The wife went over and got him, brought him back from Japan and all and stuff like that, just about made it through that situation. While he was away, then Jimmy Garvin, of course, big fan of gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, of course, on the show as well, stepped into that Freebird situation. But that whole Freebird situation really became, they were like the Horsemen, really. They were one of the first groups as well in wrestling that actually became as big as rock stars. So it was massive, and they were living the lifestyle as well. They were drinking, they were partying, they were training, they were wrestling, they were doing all these things. Of course, we know that Terry went over to Japan. Of course, he teamed up with another guy I'm such a huge fan of from back in the day, Dr. Death Steve Williams. What a team that is. Just imagine being a pro wrestler standing across the ring from these two absolute murderers in the ring. And imagine the pain you're going through over there. And especially in Japan, we know it's so snug and so tough as well. But imagine these two as well. So absolutely unbelievable. Got rushed to hospital, nearly died in Japan. Then on the flight, of course, heading over on a flight again, back over to Japan with Dr. Death. Had a, this heart attack issue and stuff, went blue in the face. Dr. Death was talking about a number of times he had to slap him around to bring him back around, and it worked. But this time it didn't quite work and stuff like that. So he was hospitalised. But then he returned and he was never the same. That issue that the oxygen to the blood, whatever it is, affected him badly. You could see in the shoot interview that they showed, it's heartbreaking to watch it and stuff like that, that you go from being this guy to this guy, and struggling to put words together. Not sure even if in your own mind whether you're kind of a shadow of your former self. We heard Jim Cornette talking about how Terry, physically he was there, but mentally he wasn't, and he just checked out. He just wasn't there and stuff like that. The Shield interview was a very tough one to watch. Went through a number of the King of Deathmatch matches as well, which they're renowned for, himself and Mick Foley, all that kind of stuff. Certainly not my flavour of wrestling, that's for sure. Really, really tough. Michael Hayes brought him into the WWE. Then he came in as the executioner, involved with the Buried Alive matches with the Undertaker and all. And I think Undertaker had made the point at the time it just wasn't working, and that was it. And then out of there again, and then obviously when you drop from that kind of that high again from being in there, it's just a real show where it's the cycle of wrestling, where so many highs and then those lows can happen so quick. You can drop from that fall from grace is unbelievable. You can be right up here and the next minute you're down here. And how do they deal with that situation? Back then there was no way of dealing with it. There was no counselling, there was no wellness program, there was none of that kind of stuff. You were just left to your own devices, stroke voices to deal with that kind of thing. And unfortunately then, sadly he had a heart attack at the age of 40 and passed away due to a blood clot. Which is really, really sad. 40 years of age and no age at all, But it was another tough episode. He's another icon of the business. He's in there with the Freebirds and all that kind of stuff that stands up there. Michael Hayes, as we know, still works in WWE to this day as an agent and all that kind of stuff. But they were absolutely mega. They were rock stars, and he was the enforcer in that group and stuff like that. We hear his kids talking fondly about how he put the little things together and stuff like that, the things that make a difference in wrestling, that people notice, and also wrestlers and all notice, that really truly make you great. And I like that little bit that was there in that, he also spoke about, we're sort of skipping around here, but he also spoke about little ideas like, when they went up to WWF and they had that meeting with Vince, he fell asleep during the meeting with Vince. So their time up there was very, very short-lived. It didn't work out and stuff like that. So when you have a chance and you miss that chance. And again, it's another fall from grace. You know, the opportunity is there, but you just don't step through that door and take that opportunity. So yeah, it's a very, very sad story. 40 years of age, no age at all. We've seen it in the business from around that time period. How many 40 plus wrestlers have we seen, you know, just pass away from, you know, the toil of the business, and how they craved wanting to be with their family, and the story of their kids craving wanting them at home, but it just didn't work out that way because the schedule was so torturous, and if you weren't on tour, you weren't earning. So they always felt they needed to be there. Even when he was in Japan and he went through those tough tours, he'd be over there for 6 months on end. Imagine losing your father out of your life for nearly 6 months going to Japan. And remember, back then, it's not like now. You didn't have social media, you didn't have FaceTime and all these different things, and WhatsApp and all these different communications where you can literally talk to someone on the other side of the world within the press of a button. Back then, when you were gone, and you were heard of. In case the only time you really heard of something is if something had happened, you know. So it must have been torture on the mother, must have been torture on the family, must have been torture on the wife, the kids, and all that kind of stuff, not having their dad around. And then when he did come home, it was only short-lived because he was back on the road again. He wanted to go back out working with the Freebirds and all that kind of stuff and all, because you miss the limelight. You crave that limelight. That's your thing. And if you don't have that, you look for that kind of kick that you get out of that elsewhere. Drugs, drink, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, very, very sad story to sum up. You know, a guy that we lost way too early. Very, very sad demise for this guy. He was absolutely unbelievable as a wrestler. But it's a kind of a strain, isn't it, that's gone through this season. A lot of the stories are kind of very similar and stuff like that. Not necessarily dark, but necessarily kind of sad stories and stuff like that, because we know so many of these wrestlers have kind of taken this path, and that's why they die so young, especially during this time period. And a lot of them, especially when they go over to Japan, it was so grueling. Can't even begin to imagine what it was like, the toll it took on guys' bodies. And like I said, if you got injured, you weren't earning, out of sight, out of mind. No one really cared, and that's the way it was. As Austin once put it, you take a cog out, you put a new cog in, and the wheel keeps on spinning, and that's the way the business works. But until next time, folks, let us know your thoughts on this. Dark Side of the Ring, Season 5, Episode 3, Terry Gordy, final flight of the Freebirds. Again, just another tragic, very sad story, a fall from grace. You know, health issues, wasn't around the family as much, and you can see how they craved wanting him to be around, but yet they are still so proud of what he achieved in the business and stuff like that. 40 years of age, no age at all when you think about it. Folks, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification button, drop a like on the video. Let us know your thoughts so far on Dark Side of the Ring Season 5. Probably, again, as I said, like the other episodes, probably needs a kind of a new name or something like that. Not so dark. Till next time, folks, talk to you real soon.